The email came in the middle of the night. She hadn't seen his name in years. Just those 8 letters on the screen were enough to make her stomach tighten. He wrote only one line. "We need to talk about the child." She froze. The child he once called a lie. The child she raised alone. The child who bore his eyes, his stubborn silence, his entire jawline. Attached was a file. A DNA report. She opened it, already knowing. The numbers confirmed what her body, her mind, her memory had always known. 99.9% probability of paternity. But it wasn't the report that shook her. It was the timestamp. He had done the test 2 years ago and said nothing. She stood in front of the university library, holding a thin envelope in her hands. The campus buzzed around her, voices, footsteps, laughter, but she no longer felt a part of that rhythm. Her eyes were fixed on the door in front of her, where she knew he would eventually appear. Inside the envelope was the result that changed everything. 2 lines. 1 decision. 1 irreversible truth. When he finally arrived, she stepped toward him, handed the envelope without a word, and waited. He opened it, glanced at the result, and looked back at her as if nothing in the paper mattered, as if she were just another administrative error. Then he turned around and walked away. She stood in silence, watching his back fade into the blur of students, knowing that whatever future she imagined had just disappeared. He didn't come back with questions. He didn't deny it out loud. He simply left. 2 days later, he submitted paperwork to transfer out of the university. His family had influence, and things moved quickly for people like him. Within a week, he had disappeared not only physically but from records, group chats, class lists. People around her stopped replying to messages. She began receiving strange looks from staff. Professors grew colder. And then came the letters. The first was about a disciplinary review. No details were given. Then her housing was marked for reevaluation due to eligibility inconsistencies. Her work-study position was frozen. Cafeteria access revoked. She submitted appeals, went to offices, begged to understand what was happening. No one responded. She stopped receiving emails from the academic board. The one person she had trusted, the only person who should have stood beside her, had vanished, leaving behind a shadow that stretched across every part of her student life. Each day became harder. Food was limited. She began skipping meals so that her roommate wouldn't notice. Sleep came only in fragments, interrupted by anxiety and a quiet, constant ache growing in her body. She was 17 weeks pregnant. There was no one to call. She hadn't told her parents. They wouldn't understand. Friends had vanished, either too uncomfortable to help or too afraid to be involved. The isolation wasn't loud. It was slow, creeping, suffocating. By the 3rd week after he left, her scholarship was suspended. She received the notice in a formal envelope, slid under her dorm door without a knock. It cited conduct unbecoming of a university representative, vague and unrecoverable. She packed her belongings that night. There was nowhere to go, but she could no longer stay. She moved into a motel with the little savings she had left from summer jobs, carefully measuring every dollar. The silence from the university was now complete. She was no longer a student in their system, no longer a resident, no longer part of anything she had spent years working toward. But the baby was still growing. It was the only constant, the only future she could still believe in. Every kick reminded her that she was not entirely alone, even if the world had turned its back on her. On the last morning before she left campus for good, she passed the administrative building. Something compelled her to step inside. She wandered the hallway where she once lined up for enrollment, now empty. Then she saw it, a bulletin board in the dean's office lobby. On it were printed notices of disciplinary actions, appeals, rejections. At the bottom was a photo. Hers. A red line drawn through it. Beside it, ineligible for reinstatement. She didn't cry. She just turned around, walked out, and didn't look back. The motel room was small, cold, and dimly lit. The walls were stained from time and moisture, and the carpet gave off a dull, stale odor that clung to her clothes. She placed her few belongings on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the springs that poked through the worn mattress. Outside, rain streaked the single window with a steady rhythm, the kind that usually lulled people to sleep. For her, it was a reminder that the world kept moving, indifferent to her collapse. Each morning, she woke early, well before the sun. She wrapped her growing belly with an oversized sweatshirt, pulled her hair into a knot, and headed out to search for work. She walked miles on aching feet, passing signs that read, "Help Wanted," with fine print that excluded her. No experience, no references, no luck. Eventually, she found a job cleaning houses, not through an agency, but through a stranger at a bus stop who offered her $50 to clean a bathroom. She accepted without hesitation. The work was harsh. She scrubbed floors until her hands cracked and bled. She learned to carry her weight without bending at the waist, to breathe through nausea while cleaning strangers' messes. She ate only when necessary, stretching a single sandwich over 2 meals. Her body shrank while her stomach swelled, and every time she thought about stopping, she remembered the ultrasound photo tucked in her coat pocket, the only possession she truly cared about. The motel manager demanded payment weekly. If she was a day late, he pounded on her door at night. Once, he threatened to call social services. Another time, he unplugged her heater. She said nothing. Complaints cost energy. Energy she didn't have. Instead, she kept her head down and whispered promises to her unborn child. Promises that one day they would leave this place. One day, she would have a key to a real home. Months passed. The rain never stopped. Her hands became permanently raw, her back constantly ached, and her shoes were more whole than fabric. But the baby was healthy. That's what the clinic told her, the free clinic 2 buses away, where they called her by a number and charged her nothing but time. She sat in waiting rooms for hours, surrounded by women with stories etched into their faces, stories that mirrored her own in pain and perseverance. Then, one evening, everything changed. She was returning from a cleaning job, her arms sore, her mind fogged from fatigue. As she approached the motel, she noticed a car parked across the street. A sleek, black luxury car. It didn't belong there. Not among the broken vehicles with taped-up windows. The headlights were off, the windows tinted. She hesitated. Something about the way it sat, too still, too deliberate, unsettled her. The next night, it was there again. And again the night after that. Never moving. Never running. Just present. Watching. At first, she thought it was paranoia. That exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. But on the 5th day, the motel manager asked if she was expecting someone. When she said no, he frowned and mumbled something about rich people sniffing around the poor. Then he laughed and walked away. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, staring through the crack in the curtain, waiting for movement. The car stayed until dawn, then vanished. And when she finally opened the door the next morning, she found something taped to it, an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was her, standing at the intersection months ago, leaning over a man lying on the pavement. Her hands stained with blood, her face twisted with fear. The timestamp confirmed it. And beneath the photo, a single line, printed in crisp black ink. "We know what you did." She stared at the photo for hours, unable to look away. It was like holding a ghost, not of someone else, but of herself. That night, the memory of the accident came back with painful clarity. The moment she ran toward the crumpled figure, the smell of oil and burning rubber, the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She hadn't thought about it in months, not since the baby started to grow. But now, someone had unearthed it, and they were watching. The days that followed were a blur of dread and exhaustion. She continued working, cleaning houses, scrubbing offices, sweeping church basements. But now, every time she stepped outside, she felt the weight of unseen eyes. The car would appear and disappear. Some nights it followed her for a few blocks, headlights turned off, just far enough to cast doubt. At the clinic, she asked if someone had inquired about her. The receptionist shook her head, but with unease. Something had shifted. On the 7th night, the car was gone, but a new envelope had taken its place. This time, it contained only a name, V. Graves. There was no return address, no message. Just the name, typed in bold letters across a blank sheet of paper. She had no idea who it was, but the name clung to her thoughts like smoke. She spent what little money she had left on an hour of internet time at a nearby library. She typed the name, and the results shattered her. Vivian Graves, wife of Edwin Graves, real estate mogul, philanthropist, and mother of the man she had once trusted. The man who denied her. The man who abandoned her. Vivian was not just anyone. She sat on the board of hospitals, universities, and charity foundations. Her image was everywhere: red carpets, newspapers, interviews. But what caught the woman's breath was a single line in a minor article. Her advocacy began after her husband's accident in Houston, the near-death event that changed their family forever. She scrolled faster, tracing timelines. The accident had happened the same week she had pulled the man from the street. A pedestrian hit and left unconscious. No identification. No witnesses. The article didn't say much. But she knew. Somehow, she had saved that man. And now, his mother had found her. The next day, she returned to the motel and found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a business card. High-quality paper, embossed letters, minimalist design. The name was there again, V. Graves, and beneath it, a handwritten note. We should talk. Your life may be more valuable than you think. Her hands trembled. Was this a threat? A warning? An opportunity? She wasn't sure. But there was no phone number. No address. Just the card. She waited for 2 more days, unable to sleep. She kept the curtains drawn, flinched at every knock, and turned off the lights at night. On the 3rd morning, the motel manager knocked. Not to threaten, but to hand her something. A woman dropped this off. Said you'd know what to do. It was a small box, wrapped in gold paper. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, a printed DNA test request form, already filled with her name, and a prepaid card. Enough to cover testing, travel, and a week of food. She stared at the box for a long time. She knew what it meant. Someone out there had suspicions. Or worse, someone knew the truth. She wasn't ready, but she had no choice. She packed the photo, the test request, and the ultrasound. Then she walked out the door, not to clean, but to be found. She didn't sleep that night. The small box with the DNA form sat untouched on the nightstand, casting a silent weight over the room. She stared at it as if it might blink, as if it might whisper answers she wasn't ready to hear. Everything about it felt too precise, too orchestrated. The name, the card, the money, all delivered without words. Someone wanted her to move. But on whose terms? By morning, she had made a decision. Not because she trusted them, but because she needed to reclaim even a sliver of control. She gathered the items, folded the form carefully, and dressed in silence. Her coat barely closed over her stomach now. The weather was turning colder, but she didn't feel it. Her nerves drowned out everything. She took the bus across town to the clinic listed on the form. It was clean, upscale, nothing like the free clinic she was used to. The receptionist didn't ask for ID. They were expecting her. That alone made her skin crawl. Within 15 minutes, she was seated in a private room, sterile and silent. The nurse took her blood quickly, efficiently, without small talk. Then she left her alone again. Before she could leave, another woman entered. Older, graceful, eyes that held too much calculation. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask questions. She only said, "You did more than save him. You changed the direction of everything." The woman handed her a folded sheet of paper and walked out. The paper wasn't a threat. It was an offer. It detailed a living arrangement. Housing, food, healthcare, privacy. No strings. No publicity. No contact with the man. Just peace, safety, and silence. It felt like a contract disguised as kindness. She took the bus home in silence. The city seemed more distant now, like something she had already left behind. When she arrived, the motel room door was ajar. Her heart jumped. But inside, nothing was missing. Instead, on the bed lay a file folder. The top page had a name, Daniel Graves. His records were inside. Academic, financial, medical, even sealed legal documents. She scanned pages with shaking hands. Among them, a scanned letter, one he had written the week after the accident. In it, he begged someone to find the woman who saved me. He didn't know her name, but he described her perfectly. And then another page, a sealed test result, dated months earlier. DNA. Fatherhood probability, 99.9%. Signed and notarized that he had known all along. He hadn't denied her out of ignorance. He had denied her because admitting the truth meant admitting weakness. It meant challenging the narrative his family built for him, and he had chosen silence. She sat for hours staring at the file. Rage came in waves, followed by grief. But beneath it all was something sharper. Resolve. She could expose everything. The lie, the cover-up, the money. But how? That night, she scanned the documents onto a flash drive and stored it at the bottom of her child's crib, hidden beneath layers of blankets. She didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of knowing. The days after the discovery felt like walking through fog. She moved with purpose, but everything felt slow, muted, suspended. She still went to work, still kept her head down. But her mind was elsewhere, building timelines, recalling details, calculating risks. The flash drive with the documents became her new heartbeat. She checked it every morning and every night. It stayed under her child's crib, zipped into the corner of a blanket only she knew how to fold. 3 days later, she returned to the clinic for the DNA results. This time, the receptionist handed her a sealed envelope without a word. She walked out before opening it, breathing slowly, hands trembling. At the bus stop, she sat down and peeled the flap open. The numbers were printed in bold black ink, like a final sentence from a judge. Probability, 99.9%. It was official. There was no more room for denial. He was the father. She returned to the motel and stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. For months, she had questioned her own reality. Now, she had evidence. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't lying. She was telling the truth, and they had tried to erase it. She opened her laptop and began drafting an email. Not to him, not to his family, but to a journalist, a local reporter known for exposing political cover-ups. She didn't include everything, just enough to get a reply. I'm interested. Let's talk. They met 2 days later in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. She handed him a copy of the flash drive, along with a statement. The reporter said nothing at first. He read the summary, then the scan of the predated DNA result. His hands went still. He asked her only one question. Do you want this public? She nodded. Within 48 hours, the story was live. Headline: Candidate's hidden past. DNA test confirms child he denied. It spread quickly, first in local circles, then national. The article laid out the full arc: the paternity denial, the private test he had hidden, the motel, the surveillance. Screenshots, dates, official documents. The photo from the accident appeared in full resolution, matched against hospital records and time-stamped footage. The public reaction was immediate. His campaign suspended all media appearances. Press flooded his family's estate. Donations dried up. His mother, Vivian, issued a vague statement about unresolved family matters. But she didn't deny it. That silence spoke louder than anything. Then came the backlash. Anonymous calls to the motel. Messages slipped under her door. A man in a suit watching from the curb. She reported it to police, but nothing came of it. When she returned home one night, her door was open, and the flash drive was gone. But she had made copies. She moved to a safer neighborhood with help from the news network. They arranged temporary housing, new locks, security monitoring. For the first time in over a year, she slept through the night. But only once. Because the next morning, a letter arrived. No return address. No postage. Just 3 words typed on a white page. See you soon. She didn't leave the apartment for 3 days after the note. Every sound outside her window made her skin tighten. She moved silently, her movements deliberate, her thoughts sharp. She had lived with fear before. Fear of eviction, of hunger, of being forgotten. But this was different. This was targeted, intentional, personal. She contacted the journalist again. He offered protection, legal advice, even relocation. But she refused. She hadn't come this far to disappear. Not now. Not when she was finally being heard. The journalist released a follow-up article, outlining the threats and intimidation she had received since the story broke. That piece drew even more attention. It reached national news outlets. Her inbox flooded with messages, some filled with support, others with venom. One message stood out. It was from him. The man who had once turned away from her now reached out with a single request: a meeting. He claimed he didn't know about the threats. He wanted to make things right. She didn't respond immediately. She read and reread the message until it blurred. Then she deleted it. She needed more than apologies. She needed actions. A week passed. Then came the court summons. His family filed for partial custody, citing wealth, stability, and a need for paternal involvement. It was a move straight from their playbook, power disguised as concern. But she was ready. At the hearing, she sat calmly beside her lawyer, a pro bono fighter from a nonprofit group that had taken up her case. Across the room sat the man who once told her she was lying. He didn't look confident anymore. He looked tired, smaller, deflated. His mother didn't show up. The courtroom was quiet, tense, and filled with the weight of reputations on the line. Her lawyer presented everything: the hidden test, the threats, the flash drive, the news coverage, the journalist's affidavit, the motel footage. The judge listened, occasionally raising an eyebrow but saying nothing. When it was time for her to speak, she did so clearly, with steady breath and eyes that didn't waver. She told the truth, not just the facts, but the feelings, the abandonment, the nights without heat, the hospital bill she couldn't pay, and the child, the one thing she never stopped protecting. She recounted moments no file could reflect: the silence in the clinic, the first time she heard a heartbeat, the empty crib beside a leaking wall, the long nights holding a crying newborn, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Her words carried not just pain, but dignity, and that made the silence in the room louder than any gavel. The ruling came 2 days later. Full custody awarded to the mother. No visitation without psychological evaluation. Financial support mandated. Legal costs covered by the father's family. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no cheers, just the sound of resolution settling like dust after a storm. It wasn't just a win. It was a reckoning. That evening, she walked to the park near her new home. Her child, now almost walking, clutched her fingers with wobbly strength. The sunset was warm, streaked with gold, and the air smelled like early spring. For the first time, she felt the season in her chest, not just on her skin. She sat on a bench and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was the first ultrasound. Behind it, the DNA results. She smiled, then placed both into a metal box and locked it. Not out of secrecy, but as closure. They were no longer her burden, just her proof. The flash drive, once guarded like oxygen, now rested inside a safety deposit box. She no longer needed to hold it. The truth had done its job. She stood and took her son's hand. They walked home slowly, pausing at every flower, every gust of wind. The future wasn't loud. It didn't roar in celebration. It whispered with peace. She had taken her life back.